So let's just review so far. Um, we learned about 4 types of immunity. Immunity means what? Immunity means to be immune. It means to not be affected if. Okay, immunity actually, like in literal sense in this context, would mean that if the active pathogen was to enter our body, we would already have memory cells. We would already have memory cells, as well as antibodies with the complementary antigens in order to neutralize and kill these active pathogens before getting any symptoms. Okay, this is what it means to be immune. Okay, cool. So there are 4 kinds of ways of getting immune. 2 are by natural ways, 2 are by artificial ways or human intervention. A natural way of active immunity. Okay, now what is active and what is passive? Okay, we've already explained what natural and artificial is. What is active and passive? Active means to actively have the right memory and antibodies with the complementary antigens to kill the active pathogen if you get exposed to it before getting symptoms. That's what being actively immune means. To be passively immune is to get antibodies externally from an external source. Okay, and this would obviously be only a temporary immunity because antibodies die quickly. Okay, it's a low lifespan. Okay, unlike memory cells, these have pretty low lifespan. Okay, so this would only last temporarily, but getting it from an external source is your passive immunity because you are immune for this small amount of time. Now, how would you get active and passive immunity naturally and artificially? Natural active immunity would mean to naturally get exposed to a foreign antigen, get your immune system stimulated, and have the whole specific response for the what do you call it? Sorry. Yeah, have that whole thing play out in order to create T memory as well as B memory cells to then have that immunity for a second encounter. You could say the exact same thing for artificial active immunity, where you artificially this time bring in not an active but a unactive, inactive, or a dead version or a non-viable version of a pathogen into the body via what we call a vaccine, and then let our body create memory, T memory and B memory cells, or T memory or T and B memory leukocytes, or even or lymphocytes. Those are, you can also say that. In order to have an immunity to that antigen in case of an active active pathogen, exposure to it. Okay, cool. Natural passive immunity would be gotten by one, antibodies being received from your mother through the placenta when you are a developing fetus, as well as through the mother's milk once you're born. This is accounted only, we're only referring to for your mammals over there. Temporary immunity, as memory cells are not produced and received antibodies are excreted out of the body or destroyed. Okay, so we say that you have a low lifespan. So how are they removed? They're excreted out of the body or they're destroyed. Okay, so this is temporary immunity. Okay. Over here, you can also say that the immune system is not stimulated because these are just antibodies already present there. You didn't create those antibodies. Your body, your immune system didn't respond to create antibodies to fight that pathogen that it found. No, this was just there present because of the breastfeeding or the placenta, from the mother. Artificial passive immunity would be simply the same thing. Artificially injecting antibodies into an individual. This would obviously mean that the immune system is not responded, as memory cells are not responded, so it's temporary, and the injected antibodies would be used up, excreted, or destroyed. Okay. For both of these, you would have long-term immunity. But we have to kind of talk about it in terms of the marking scheme. So body makes its antibodies on exposure to a foreign antigen. Immune system is stimulated in this process, so plasma cells will be active. Active meaning that the memory cells are produced, which provide long-term immunity. Remember, if it's a humoral response, then you're going to be having antibodies being produced. If an antibody is produced, therefore you need plasma cells to be produced. Plasma cells to be produced means you need effector cells to be cloned from your activated B cells. In the process, you're also going to be forming the B memory cells. The same thing goes for when you have a pathogen that's already inside a cell. You would need the cell-mediated response, which would require T killer cells to be activated, which means that you would also have your T killer memory cells to be made in the process, right? So, in this sense, you're always going to be having memory cells produced, meaning that you're always going to be ready for a secondary infection or, a secondary infection or just future infections. You'll be able to get through it without feeling any symptoms. Okay. Now let's talk about elimination, eradication, and control. There's a difference between eradication and elimination. Eradication is when it's completely removed from the world, often by vaccination. This is what we did for smallpox. The disease is no longer found in any people, in animals, or anywhere in the environment. Elimination would mean the situation where a disease would disappear in defined areas, but the pathogen remains in animals and the environment. So the disease cannot be realistically eradicated. It remains prevalent as endemic in some parts of the world. Okay? This is not to say that people cannot be cannot be immune to it. You can be immune to it and it can still be existing, right? However, in some areas where people are not vaccinated towards it, or against it rather, then in those areas you would have these kind of diseases being endemic, again, only in those areas. Okay? Now, also, eradication would also mean that perhaps smallpox was common or could only survive in the host cells of humans, not animals or anything like that, which would make it a lot easier to eradicate it as compared to something that would stay in animals, land, as well as humans. Okay, cool. Control would mean a disease that's controlled, so it still occurs but not frequently enough to make it a significant health problem. Mutation evolution of pathogens makes some diseases only able of elimination and control but not eradication. This is also another thing where we have, let's say, those retroviruses which can always form different strains, which means their antigens change, which means the memory cells that we've produced for them have no use. So in these cases of mutation and evolution, you need to always be one step ahead. You always need to be one mutation ahead in order to always have an immunity to these pathogens which evolve and mutate. So that's why, in order to try to get a bit closer to that, that's what we're going to be talking about. Poopy face. We had. Do, 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 do. Oops. Well, when did we zoom in this close? Man. Okay, so for a disease to be fully eradicated or eliminated or controlled, herd immunity is one way we can actually achieve this. Okay, herd immunity is when a high proportion of the population is going to be immune to a pathogen. Okay, by again doing any of those four types of immunity. If we manage to do any of those four types of immunity to a high proportion of the population, again through vaccinations, they're usually talking about artificial active immunity, right? So through artificial active immunity, so this one, through artificial active immunity of a high proportion of the population, you're going to be lowering the risk of infection to all, including to those who are not vaccinated. Okay. What the hell am I doing? Why did I say that? Ugh. Oh dear. Okay. Yeah. Anyways, I feel like an idiot, honestly. You're gonna. Yeah, yeah.
ex-girlfriend.
Alright, so oops, I'm bleeding. Herd immunity, yeah. So again, high proportion of the population is going to be artificially is going to have artificial active immunity to a pathogen, thus lowering the risk of infection to all. This makes it easier for the pathogen itself to get eradicated or controlled or eliminated. The percentage or proportion that needs to be vaccinated can vary from one disease to another, and it depends on factors such as method of spread of the disease and how infectious it is. Okay? Remember, method of spread, if you remember, there were 6: inhalation, ingestion, physical contact, like, what was it? Like, non-living things, like rocks and stuff. That's all I remember. Vectors is like from a living organism, inhalation, ingestion, non-living, direct contact, which is physical, and inoculation coming through a break in the skin. Okay, so those were the barriers of entry. So it depends on the not barriers of entry, the method of spread and how infectious it is. So inhalation, ingestion, physical contact, non-living, which we call formites, living, which we call vectors, as well as the last one, what was it? Inoculation, entering through a break in the skin, which I currently have on my neck. Antibiotics are substances that are produced by microorganisms such as fungi used to inhibit the growth of bacteria. So this is pretty cool. Actually, I didn't know they were produced by microorganisms, but I did know that they were used to inhibit the growth of bacteria. The fact that they're substances is a marking point, so yeah. What is a substance? They work based on selective toxicity, so they don't affect human cells but affects bacterial cells, okay? This is because antibiotics have specific target sites on prokaryotic cells and their organelles only. Okay, they go into how these work. These work against microorganisms by the principle of selective toxicity. They interfere with metabolism. If they interfere with metabolism or function of the pathogen, with minimal damage. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, sorry. No. Okay, so is our antimicrobial drugs being toxic to the pathogen? Because that's what it sounds like. No, minimal damage to the cell. This is commonly, so this is the idea of selective toxicity. They are toxic to the pathogen, but not of the human host. Now, this is most commonly used in best known antimicrobials or antibiotics. Okay, sorry. So antibiotics are a form of antimicrobial drugs, which makes sense because we have antimicrobial drugs formed by plants because they have defenses against antimicrobes and they don't necessarily produce antibiotics, no, right? And also, antimicrobials also means that it's not necessarily we're talking about, um, not necessarily we're talking about viruses, but just pathogens in general. Wait one sec. I need to. Okay, cool. So, um, the ones that we use for our body are best known. So there are other kinds of antimicrobial substances that we use, but the most commonly used and best known ones are antibiotics. So they can be used, but to a limited degree, in the treatment of some fungal infections. I don't know why they wrote that point. First antibiotic was penicillin. Penicillin does not work against all pathogens, so scientists searched for more and are searching today. Many other antibiotics have been discovered, but globally, penicillin and many antibiotics derived from it are still commonly used to combat bacterial infections. Okay, remember keyword bacterial. Okay, not viral. Antibiotics are effective because they destroy the biochemistry of bacterial cells. Different classes of antibiotic. Okay, this makes sense if we're thinking about the definition of them acting as a toxin that inhibits their metabolism. That would obviously have to deal with something about disrupting their biochemistry, right? So remember, you know what the end goal is. You are just trying to see how they do it, okay? So we have different classes of antibiotic which interrupt different processes. The main classes of antibiotic and the way they affect are summarized. So we have bacteriostatic and bactericidal. Here's some of the things they do, but you know the overall effect. You also have some of the names and some examples of antibiotics, okay? Um, so you have anti-metabolite, okay. Bacteriostatic, you have doing two kinds of things. Um, Anti-metabolites interrupting metabolic pathways, blocking nucleic acid synthesis, or the synthesis of vital nutrients such as folic acid in bacteria. Okay, so synthesis of things, protein synthesis inhibitor, interrupting or preventing transcription and or translation of microbial genes, so production of protein is affected. Okay, so kind of like what the transcription repressors um, do um, when you have the thingy. What's it called? When you have the DNA virus, its mode of attack, right? Mm, 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 mm. And the Ray-Ban Meta, man. Everyone's using it. Wow. Damn man, I need to move my phone to a different room or something. I don't know. I can't really seem to like stop myself. How am I supposed to remember this? Inhibits the growth of bacteria, and this one just straight up destroys the bacteria, as you can see with the word. Selective toxicity, so they don't affect human cells. This works by having target sites on the prokaryotic cells and their organelles only. So if we look at the bacteria in specific, they have, let's say, mesosomes. These are target site. These could be target sites by being organelles present on these special bacteria only. There's also plasmids. There's also I don't know, other stuff. So flagella. So these are organelles that can act as target sites on the prokaryotic cells, and they are organelles only. Okay, fine. Wait, I'm not thinking right about this right. The organelles are not the target sites. They have target sites, and this will affect the organelles only. Okay, these target sites are not present in eukaryotic cells, in viruses, nor fungi. So there's something special in bacteria, in which these antibiotic substances can bind to, which is not present in any other kind of eukaryotic cell, or in viruses and fungi. So that's broadly every kind of cell. Antibiotics are of two classes. So this can be of the narrow or broad each can be of narrow or broad spectrum. I don't know what that means. Bacteriostatic is just to inhibit the growth or the metabolism. Bactericidal is to kill it directly. The bacteriostatic and bactericidal terms are misleading. Bactericidal don't kill all pathogens, kills 99% only, and if lower doses are used, kills even less. So bactericidal can then be called bacteriostatic. So the terms can be used flexibly. Genocidal. A broad spectrum antibiotic destroys a wide range of bacteria. So, okay, so that's what we mean by a broad spectrum antibiotic. It's kind of like a non-specific immune response where it destroys or it can act against a wide range. And this could include natural gut flora, so which means the good bacteria as well. Okay, so when we mean not wide, we mean wide enough to even include the good ones. While a narrow spectrum antibiotic destroys one or two specific pathogens. So we're not just destroying a wide range of bacteria, we're not destroying any kind of useful bacteria either. We're destroying specific pathogens, and these are called narrow spectrum. These are kind of like your specific immune responses. Now, the factors and effectiveness of any antimicrobial drug include: one, this concentration of the drug in the area of the body infected, and how and this will be affected by how easily the drug can reach the tissue and how quickly it is going to be excreted. So if you remember, when we were talking about the process of making drugs, we were talking about excretion of the drug as well as concentration of the drug. And I'm opening my phone again. Concentration, I mean, like how the drug is ingested, as well as, you know you know Lamayo, do, 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 do. Actually prancing, bro. Acidic's influence. Yeah. Go. Okay. Hmm.